The sun hung high over the bustling Central Market in downtown Carson City, its rays glinting off the polished storefronts and casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. The air buzzed with the chatter of vendors hawking fresh produce, the clink of coins changing hands, and the rhythmic honks of cars weaving through the nearby streets. Amid the chaos, Anna Thompson navigated the crowd, her worn sneakers scuffing against the dusty ground. Her faded jeans and plain gray t-shirt stood in stark contrast to the vibrant displays of fruit jewelry and handmade crafts around her. At 19, Anna carried a quiet strength in her slim frame. Her brown eyes, sharp with awareness, but softened by a kindness that seemed out of place in the gritty market. She clutched a small cloth bag, her only possession of value, filled with a few dollars she'd earned helping an elderly vendor carry crates of apples earlier that morning. Her life wasn't easy, living under the thumb of her stepmother Margaret, and her stepsister Sarah made every day a test of endurance. But Anna had learned to keep her head down and her heart open, finding small joys in helping others where she could. Today, though, the market felt different. There was a tension in the air, a sharpness that made Anna's stomach twist as she moved through the crowd. She was on her way to buy a loaf of bread with her earnings when she noticed Sarah strutting through the market like she owned it. Sarah, with her sleek blonde hair pulled into a high ponytail, wore a tailored navy blazer and a matching skirt that screamed, "Money, money." Anna knew their family didn't have. Her 6-inch heels clicked against the pavement, drawing eyes from every corner of the market. A designer purse dangled from her arm, its leather gleaming under the sunlight, and her lips curled into a smug smile as she chatted loudly on her phone, tossing her head back with a laugh that grated on Anna's nerves. Sarah was 22, 3 years older than Anna, but carried herself like she was royalty, her arrogance a shield against the world. Anna ducked behind a stall selling woven baskets, hoping to avoid her stepsister's notice. Sarah had a way of turning any encounter into a public humiliation, and Anna had learned long ago to steer clear when she could. As Sarah passed by, Anna's eyes caught a flash of black tumbling to the ground. Sarah's purse had slipped from her arm, landing in the dust with a soft thud. The crowd barely noticed, too, caught up in their own transactions, but Anna froze her breath, catching. Before she could move, a woman stepped forward, a woman who looked like she'd seen better days. Her name, though Anna didn't know it yet, was Jane Harper. Jane's clothes were tattered, a faded jacket hanging loosely over her thin frame, and her dark hair was matted, tucked under a worn scarf. Her face was smudged with dirt, and her hands trembled slightly as she bent to pick up the purse. To anyone watching, she looked like one of the many homeless people who lingered around the market's edges, scavenging for scraps or spare change. But there was something in her eyes, a quiet dignity, a flicker of purpose, that Anna noticed even from a distance. Jane clutched the purse carefully as if it were fragile, and took a tentative step towards Sarah, who was still engrossed in her phone call, oblivious to her loss. "Excuse me, ma'am," Jane said, her voice rough but polite, holding out the purse. "You dropped this." The words cut through the market's noise, and a few heads turned. Sarah spun around, her eyes narrowing as she registered Jane's appearance. The smile vanished from her face, replaced by a sneer that made Anna's stomach churn. "What do you think you're doing with my purse?" Sarah snapped, snatching it from Jane's hands so quickly that Jane stumbled back. "You think I don't know a thief when I see one?" Her voice was loud deliberately, so drawing more eyes from the crowd. Anna's heart sank. She knew that tone Sarah was about to make a spectacle. Jane raised her hands, palms out her expression, a mix of confusion and fear. "I wasn't stealing," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I saw it fall and wanted to give it back." But Sarah wasn't listening. She stepped closer, towering over Jane in her heels, her face twisted with contempt. "Oh, please," she scoffed, flipping open the purse to check its contents. "You expect me to believe that dirty, nobody like you just happened to find my purse? You probably thought you'd slip away with it before I noticed." The crowd began to murmur, some nodding in agreement with Sarah, others shifting uncomfortably. Anna gripped the edge of the basket stall, her nails digging into the wood. She wanted to step forward to tell Sarah to stop, but the memory of Margaret's last outburst, a screaming match that ended with Anna locked out of the house for a night, kept her rooted in place. Still, her eyes stayed on Jane, who stood her ground despite Sarah's venom. "I'm telling the truth," Jane said, her voice firmer now. "I didn't touch anything inside." Sarah's laugh was sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. "Truth. From someone like you." She turned to the crowd, raising her voice. "Look at her. Does she look like someone who'd just find a purse and return it? She's a thief, plain and simple." The accusation hung heavy, and Anna saw a few vendors shake their heads, their expressions hardening. Jane's shoulders slumped slightly, but she didn't back away. "I don't want trouble," she said quietly. "I was just trying to help." That's when it happened. Sarah's hand shot out a sharp slap, landing across Jane's cheek. The sound echoed, silencing the crowd for a split second before gasps rippled through the onlookers. Jane staggered, her hand flying to her face, her eyes wide with shock. Anna's breath caught in her throat, her body tensing as if she'd been struck herself. "Don't you dare lie to me," Sarah hissed, stepping closer. "You touched my purse with those filthy hands and you thought you could get away with it." Before Jane could respond, Sarah slapped her again, harder this time, sending Jane stumbling to her knees. The purse fell to the ground again, its contents spilling out a lipstick, a few credit cards, a wad of cash. Sarah bent down, snatching up the items with a look of disgust. "See," she said to the crowd, holding up the cash. "She was probably after this." A few voices in the crowd murmured in agreement, their judgment quick and harsh. "She does look suspicious," one man muttered. "Probably a thief," a woman added, turning back to her stall. Anna's heart pounded. She wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that Jane had done nothing wrong, but fear clamped her mouth shut. She knew what Sarah was capable of, knew the way she twisted truth to suit her narrative. But then Sarah went further. As Jane tried to stand, clutching her side in pain, Sarah kicked her pointed heel, striking Jane's ribs with a sickening thud. Jane gasped, doubling over her face, contorted in agony. "Stay down, thief!" Sarah spat, brushing her hands as if ridding herself of dirt. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, but no one stepped forward. Anna's hands trembled, her bag slipping to the ground. She couldn't just stand there, not anymore. But before she could move, Jane reached out her hand, brushing Sarah's ankle as she tried to steady herself. Sarah whirled around, her face a mask of rage. "How dare you touch me?" she screamed, kicking Jane again, this time in the stomach. Jane cried out, curling into herself, blood trickling from her lip. Anna's resolve broke. She pushed through the crowd, her heart racing, ignoring the voice in her head, warning her of the consequences. "Stop it!" she shouted, her voice cracking but loud enough to make Sarah pause. The crowd turned surprised to see the quiet girl they'd barely noticed before. Sarah's eyes narrowed, recognizing Anna instantly. "You," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "What do you think you're doing, you little nobody, defending a thief?" Anna swallowed hard, her knees shaking, but she stood her ground. "She's not a thief," she said, her voice quieter now but firm. "She was trying to help you. I saw the whole thing." Sarah laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "Oh, please, You saw nothing. You're just as pathetic as she is. She stepped closer, towering over Anna, her eyes glinting with malice. Get out of my way or you'll regret it. Anna's mind raced. She knew what awaited her at home if she defied Sarah Margaret's wrath was a storm she'd weathered too many times. But as she looked at Jane crumpled on the ground, her breathing shallow and pained, something shifted inside her. She couldn't walk away. Not this time. You're wrong, Anna said, her voice steadier now. You dropped your purse, and she picked it up to give it back. That's all. The crowd shifted, some whispering, others looking at Jane with new doubt. Sarah's face reddened, her composure cracking. You're lying, she snapped, shoving Anna hard. Anna stumbled, but didn't fall. Her eyes locked on Sarah's. For a moment, the market seemed to hold its breath, the tension thick enough to choke on. Then Sarah's attention shifted back to Jane, who was struggling to sit up, her hand pressed against her side. You're lucky I don't call the cops, Sarah said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. She grabbed her purse, stuffed the spilled items back inside, and turned to leave, her heels clicking with finality. But as she walked away, Jane let out a weak groan, her body slumping forward. Anna's heart lurched. She dropped to her knees beside Jane, ignoring Sarah's parting sneer. Are you okay? She whispered, her hands hovering over Jane, afraid to touch her. Jane's eyes fluttered, her face pale, but she managed a weak nod. I'll be fine, she rasped, though her voice was strained with pain. Anna glanced around, hoping for help, but the crowd was already dispersing, their interest fading now that the drama was over. A few vendors muttered about troublemakers and thieves, their words stinging Anna's ears. She helped Jane sit up, her hands gentle but firm. We need to get you to a hospital, Anna said, her voice urgent. Jane shook her head weakly. No, I can't afford it. But Anna wasn't listening. She looped Jane's arm over her shoulder, ignoring the ache in her own muscles from carrying crates earlier. I've got you, she said, her voice soft but determined. As she helped Jane to her feet, she caught a glimpse of Sarah disappearing into the crowd, her head held high, as if nothing had happened. Anna's chest tightened with anger, but she pushed it down. Right now, Jane needed her. She didn't know who Jane was or why she'd been in the market, but something about her, maybe the quiet strength in her eyes or the way she'd stood up to Sarah despite the odds, told Anna she was more than she seemed. As they shuffled toward the market's exit, Anna's mind raced with worry. She had no money for a hospital, no phone to call for help, and no one to turn to. Margaret would be furious when she found out Anna had spent her earnings, or worse, when Sarah spun the story to make Anna look like the villain. But as she glanced at Jane, whose breathing was growing more labored, Anna knew she'd made the right choice. The market's noise faded behind them, the crowd's judgment, and Sarah's cruelty lingering like a bad dream. Anna didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of purpose. She wasn't just the girl who survived Margaret's house. She was someone who could make a difference, even if it cost her everything. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow over the crowded waiting room of Carson City General. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and the low hum of worried voices, punctuated by the occasional beep of medical equipment. Anna Thompson sat on a hard plastic chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her cloth bag resting at her feet, now empty of the few dollars she'd handed over to the hospital cashier. Her brown eyes were fixed on the double doors leading to the emergency ward, where Jane Harper had been wheeled away minutes ago, her face pale and her breathing ragged. Anna's heart pounded each beat, a mix of fear and determination. She'd used every cent she'd earned that day, money meant for bread and maybe a small treat to lift her spirits, to cover the initial cost of Jane's treatment. It wasn't enough for the full bill, but it was all she had, and the doctor's grim expression had made it clear there was no time to hesitate. Jane needed help, and Anna couldn't walk away, not after what she'd witnessed in the market. The memory of Sarah's cruelty replayed in Anna's mind like a relentless loop. The sharp crack of her hand against Jane's cheek, the vicious kick to her ribs, the way the crowd had watched some with pity, others with cold judgment. Anna's stomach twisted at the thought of her stepsister's smug face, the way she'd strutted off as if Jane's pain meant nothing. Anna had always known Sarah was mean-spirited, but today's display had been something else, calculated, almost gleeful in its malice. And yet Anna's fear of Sarah paled in comparison to her dread of facing Margaret, her stepmother, who ruled their small, run-down house on Willow Street with an iron fist. Margaret's temper was a storm that could erupt without warning, and Anna knew the moment she stepped through the door, empty-handed, and late she'd face a reckoning. Still, as she sat in the waiting room, her fingers tracing the frayed edge of her sleeve, Anna felt a quiet resolve. Helping Jane was worth it, even if it meant facing Margaret's wrath. A nurse in blue scrubs emerged from the double doors, her face tired but kind. "You're here for the woman you brought in?" she asked, glancing at Anna. Anna nodded, standing quickly, her legs shaky from hours of tension. "Is she okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The nurse's expression softened. "She's stable for now, but she took a bad hit to her abdomen. The doctor's running tests to see if there's internal damage. You did the right thing, getting her here so fast." Anna exhaled relief washing over her, though it was tempered by the weight of what came next. "Thank you," she said, her voice small. "Can I see her?" The nurse hesitated, then nodded. "She's not awake yet, but you can sit with her for a bit. Follow me." Anna grabbed her bag and followed her sneakers, squeaking on the polished floor, as they moved through a maze of corridors to a small room where Jane lay on a hospital bed. Jane looked smaller under the thin hospital blanket, her face still pale but less pained. An IV line snaked from her arm, and a monitor beeped steadily beside her. Anna sat in the chair next to the bed, her hands clasped tightly, unsure of what to say or do. "I'm here," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if Jane could hear her. "You're going to be okay." The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. She didn't know, Jane didn't know her story, or why she'd been in the market dressed like someone who'd been living on the streets. But there was something about her, a quiet strength, a flicker of resilience in her eyes, even when she'd been crumpled on the ground, that made Anna want to protect her. She thought of her own life, the years spent tiptoeing around Margaret and Sarah, swallowing their insults and enduring their punishments. Helping Jane felt like a small rebellion, a way to reclaim a piece of herself that they'd tried to crush. The clock on the wall ticked past 6, and Anna's stomach growled a sharp reminder that she hadn't eaten since morning. She ignored it, her focus on Jane's steady breathing. The doctor, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a clipboard, entered the room, his expression serious. "You're the one who brought her in?" he asked, glancing at Anna. She nodded, her throat tight. "She's got a fractured rib and some bruising, but we're more concerned about her abdomen," he said. "There's a chance she's got internal bleeding. We need to do an ultrasound, and if it's bad surgery, it's expensive, and we'll need more payment to proceed." Anna's heart sank. She'd given everything she had, and there was no way she could cover more. I don't have any more money," she admitted, her voice trembling. The doctor's face softened, but his tone was firm. "We'll do what we can, but you'll need to figure out the rest soon. She's lucky you got her here when you did." Anna nodded, her mind racing. She had no savings, no one to turn to. The only money she could think of was the small stash Margaret kept in a tin under her bed, but taking it would be suicide. As the doctor left, Anna's thoughts drifted to home. Margaret would be waiting, her sharp eyes scanning for any sign of disobedience. Anna was supposed to be back hours ago with bread and change, and the thought of facing her empty-handed made Anna's chest tighten. She glanced at Jane, who stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering but not opening. "I'll figure something out," Anna whispered, more to herself than to Jane. She stood slinging her empty bag over her shoulder and slipped out of the room, her heart heavy, but her resolve unbroken. The hospital's exit loomed ahead, and beyond it the long walk back to Willow Street. The sun had set, and the city's lights cast a harsh glow on the streets as Anna made her way home, her steps slow but deliberate. She knew what awaited her, but she couldn't regret helping Jane. It was the first time in years she'd felt like her actions mattered. The house on Willow Street was a squat, peeling structure, its faded paint and sagging porch a stark contrast to the gleaming storefronts of Central Market. Anna paused at the gate, her hand hovering over the latch. The windows glowed with light, and she could hear Margaret's voice inside, sharp and commanding, barking orders at Sarah. Anna's stomach churned. She pushed the gate open, the creak loud enough to make her wince, and stepped into the yard. Before she could reach the door, it flew open, and Margaret stood there, her wiry frame silhouetted against the light. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her eyes glinted with fury. "Where the hell have you been?" she snapped, her voice cutting through the quiet night. Anna froze, her mouth dry. I had to help someone," she started, but Margaret didn't let her finish. "Help someone," she mocked, stepping forward. "You think you're some kind of hero? Where's the money I gave you for the bread? Where's the change?" Anna's hands trembled as she clutched her bag. "I used it," she said, her voice barely audible. "There was a woman at the market. She was hurt," and Margaret's hand shot out, grabbing Anna's arm with a grip that made her gasp. "You used my money!" she hissed, her face inches from Anna's. "You ungrateful little brat! I let you live under my roof, and this is how you repay me." Anna tried to pull away, but Margaret's nails dug into her skin. "It was an emergency," Anna said, her voice shaking but firm. "She could have died." Margaret's laugh was cold, venomous. "Died good. One less problem for the world. And now you've made yourself a problem for me." Before Anna could respond, Margaret shoved her backward hard enough to make her stumble. "You're sleeping outside tonight," Margaret said, her voice low and final. "Maybe the cold will teach you some sense." She turned, slamming the door shut, the lock clicking with a sound that echoed in Anna's ears. Anna stood in the yard, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The night air was chilly, and she hugged her arms to her chest, her thin t-shirt offering little warmth. Mosquitoes buzzed around her, and the distant hum of the city felt like a mockery of her isolation. She sank to the ground, leaning against the gate, her mind racing. She thought of Jane alone in the hospital and hoped the doctors were doing everything they could. She thought of Sarah, probably inside gloating over her victory in the market, unaware of the storm she'd set in motion. Anna's eyes stung with tears, but she blinked them back. Crying wouldn't help. She'd survived Margaret's punishments before, nights locked out, days without food, endless chores, and she'd survive this. But as she sat there, the weight of her choice settled over her. She'd given everything to help a stranger, and now she had nothing left. No money, no home for the night, no way to explain herself to Margaret. Inside the house, Sarah lounged on the couch, her phone in hand, scrolling through messages with a smug smile. She'd taken more than just Jane's purse in the market. She'd slipped Jane's phone into her pocket during the chaos, along with a small bundle of cash she'd found tucked inside. Sarah had no idea who Jane was, but the phone was a shiny new model, and the cash was more than she'd expected. She glanced at the phone, its screen locked, but tempting. "This'll sell for a pretty penny," she muttered to herself, her fingers tracing the edge. She didn't know Jane was more than she seemed, didn't know the phone held secrets that could unravel her carefully curated life. All Sarah saw was an opportunity, a way to fund her next shopping spree, or impress her fiancé, a slick-talking man named Derek, who worked in her office. Sarah's mind was already spinning with plans. Maybe she'd pawn the phone. Maybe she'd use the cash to buy that dress she'd been eyeing. Either way, she felt untouchable. Outside, Anna curled up tighter, the cold seeping into her bones. She thought of her mother, long gone, who'd always told her to do what was right, no matter the cost. "Kindness is its own reward," her mother had said, her voice a faint memory now. Anna wasn't sure she believed that anymore, but she couldn't regret helping Jane. There was something about her, something that made Anna feel like their paths crossing wasn't random. She closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her, and let herself hope just for a moment that Jane would be okay. That maybe somehow this act of courage would mean something. The stars above flickered through the city's haze, and Anna drifted into an uneasy sleep, unaware that the woman she'd saved was about to change her life forever. The Central Market buzzed with its usual chaos, but today it felt like a stage set for a reckoning. The morning sun cast long shadows over the stalls, where vendors shouted about fresh tomatoes and handmade scarves, their voices blending into a familiar hum. Anna Thompson wove through the crowd, her shoulders hunched under the weight of a heavy sack of potatoes she'd been paid to carry for a vendor. Her arms ached, and her face still bore the faint bruise from Margaret's outburst 2 nights ago, but she kept moving her eyes, scanning the market for more work. The hospital bill for Jane Harper loomed over her like a storm cloud, and though she'd scraped together a few dollars since that fateful day, it was nowhere near enough to repay her stepmother's money. Anna's sneakers scuffed against the pavement, her t-shirt clinging to her skin in the late summer heat. She hadn't returned to the hospital since leaving Jane in the care of the doctors, too afraid of what she'd find, too afraid Jane might not have made it. The thought twisted her gut, but she pushed it down, focusing on the task at hand. She had to keep working, keep hustling, if she had any hope of surviving Margaret's wrath. Unbeknownst to Anna, the market was about to become the epicenter of a drama far bigger than she could imagine. Across town in the sleek glass tower of Harper Enterprises, Jane Harper sat at the head of a polished conference table, her appearance transformed. Gone were the tattered clothes and matted hair of the homeless woman Anna had saved. Now her dark hair was neatly styled, framing a face that radiated authority. She wore a tailored charcoal suit, her sharp green eyes scanning a tablet as her team of executives shuffled nervously in their seats. Jane was no ordinary woman. She was the CEO of Harper Enterprises, one of Carson City's most powerful tech firms, known for its cutting-edge software and ironclad security. She'd gone undercover in the market to test her employees' integrity, suspecting someone in her company was leaking sensitive data. The purse, the phone, the cash, they'd been bait carefully planted to draw out the culprit. And Sarah Anna's stepsister had taken it hook, line, and sinker. Jane's lips pressed into a thin line as she reviewed the security footage her team had pulled from the market. It showed Sarah snatching the purse, kicking Jane, and slipping the phone and cash into her own pocket, with a practiced ease that made Jane's blood boil. She'd recognized Sarah immediately, an ambitious but untrustworthy employee in the company's marketing department, always flaunting her designer clothes and dropping hints about her big plans. Jane had suspected Sarah of minor infractions before, but this was different. The phone Sarah had stolen contained a tracking app linked to Harper Enterprises' servers, and the data logs showed Sarah had tried to access it, likely hoping to sell the information. Jane leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping the table. "Bring her in," she said, her voice calm, but edged with steel. The executives exchanged glances, and one hurried out to summon Sarah. Back at the market, Anna set down the sack of potatoes at a vendor's stall, wiping sweat from her brow. The vendor, a kind-eyed woman named Mrs. Carter, handed her a crumpled $5 bill. "You're a hard worker, Anna," she said, her voice warm. "Don't let this place grind you down." Anna managed a small smile, tucking the money into her pocket. "Thank you, Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice soft. She turned to head toward another stall, hoping to pick up more work, when a commotion erupted near the market's entrance. A sleek black SUV had pulled up, its tinted windows gleaming under the sun. The crowd parted as two men in dark suits stepped out, their expressions serious. Anna's heart skipped a beat. She'd seen cars like that before, usually tied to trouble. She ducked behind a fruit stand, her instincts screaming to stay out of sight. The men scanned the market, their eyes locking onto Sarah, who was strutting through the crowd in a bright red dress, her phone pressed to her ear. She was laughing, oblivious to the storm heading her way. "Yeah, Derek, I've got something big," she was saying, her voice smug. "This phone's gonna make us rich." The men approached their steps, purposeful, and one tapped her on the shoulder. "Sarah Mitchell?" he asked, his tone clipped. Sarah froze, her smile faltering. "Who's asking?" she snapped, lowering her phone. The man flashed a badge, not police, but private security. "You're coming with us," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Sarah's eyes widened, but she tried to play it cool. "This is ridiculous," she said, tossing her hair. "Do you know who I am?" The second man stepped closer, his expression unyielding. "We know exactly who you are. Let's go." The crowd buzzed with whispers as Sarah was escorted to the SUV, her protests growing louder but less confident. Anna watched from her hiding spot, her heart pounding. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew Sarah well enough to guess it wasn't good. Part of her felt a flicker of satisfaction Sarah had hurt. Jane humiliated her in front of everyone, but another part of her felt a pang of dread. If Sarah was in trouble, Margaret would find a way to make Anna pay for it. She slipped out from behind the fruit stand, keeping her head down, and started toward the market's edge, hoping to avoid whatever drama was unfolding. But before she could get far, a familiar voice called out, "Anna." She froze, her stomach dropping. It wasn't Sarah or Margaret, it was Jane. Anna turned, her eyes widening as she saw Jane approaching, flanked by another suited man. Jane looked nothing like the woman Anna had carried to the hospital. Her clothes were pristine, her posture commanding, but her eyes held the same quiet strength Anna had noticed that day in the market. "Jane," Anna said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're okay." Jane smiled, a warmth in her expression that put Anna at ease. "Thanks to you," she said, stepping closer. "I need to talk to you. Can you come with me?" Anna hesitated, glancing at the SUV where Sarah had been taken. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jane's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of determination. "Justice," she said simply. "Come on. You deserve to know the truth." Anna followed Jane to a quieter corner of the market, her mind racing. Jane explained everything, her role as CEO of Harper Enterprises, her undercover mission to root out corruption, the setup with the purse and phone. "Sarah's been stealing from my company," Jane said, her voice steady but laced with anger. She thought she could sell that phone's data, but she didn't know it was a trap. She's been doing this for months, small leaks, nothing we could pin down until now. Anna's jaw dropped, her mind, struggling to process the revelation. Sarah, a thief? It made sense given her greed and arrogance, but Anna had never imagined her stepsister was involved in something so big. What happens to her now? Anna asked, her voice small. Jane's eyes softened. She'll face the consequences, legal ones. But you, Anna, you're the reason I'm here. You saved me, and I don't forget that. Before Anna could respond, Jane's phone buzzed and she glanced at it, her expression shifting to one of resolve. I need to handle this, she said. But I'm not done with you, Anna. Meet me at Harper Enterprises' office this afternoon. I have something for you. Anna nodded, too stunned to speak, as Jane and her security team headed back to the SUV. The crowd watched, whispering about the rich lady and the thief, their stories already twisting into market gossip. Anna stood there, her heart pounding, unsure of what to make of it all. She'd spent her life being invisible, surviving on scraps of kindness and her own resilience. Now someone like Jane Harper, someone powerful, had seen her, had thanked her. It felt like a dream, but the bruise on her cheek and the ache in her arms reminded her it was all too real. Anna returned to her work, carrying crates and bags for vendors, her mind buzzing with questions. What did Jane want with her? Was Sarah really going to jail? And what would Margaret do when she found out? The thought of her stepmother sent a chill down Anna's spine, but she pushed it aside. Focusing on the tasks at hand, she helped Mrs. Carter stack apples, then carried a heavy bag of rice for a grumpy vendor who barely thanked her. Each small job added a few coins to her pocket, but it was slow going, and the hospital bill weighed on her like a physical burden. By noon, her stomach was growling, but she ignored it, saving her earnings for Margaret. She couldn't afford another night outside, not with the autumn chill creeping into the air. At Harper Enterprises, Sarah sat in a stark meeting room, her red dress now seeming garish against the sterile walls. Jane stood across from her, flanked by 2 security guards and a lawyer with a thick folder of evidence. Sarah's bravado had crumbled, her hands trembling as she tried to explain herself. It was a mistake, she stammered, her voice high-pitched. I didn't know the phone was yours. I was going to return it. Jane's eyes narrowed, unyielding. You didn't know it was mine, but you knew it wasn't yours, she said coldly. And you didn't hesitate to take it or to hurt me when I tried to do the right thing. She nodded to the lawyer, who opened the folder, revealing printouts of emails, bank transactions, and data logs, all pointing to Sarah's attempts to sell company secrets. Sarah's face paled, her mouth opening and closing without a sound. You're done here, Jane said, her voice final, and you'll be hearing from the authorities. As Sarah was led away, her wrists cuffed by a security guard, Jane's thoughts turned to Anna. She'd seen the girl's courage, her willingness to risk everything for a stranger. It was rare in Jane's world to find someone so selfless, and she wasn't about to let that go unrewarded. She sent a message to her assistant, arranging a meeting at the office that afternoon. Anna deserved more than thanks. She deserved a chance to change her life. Back at the market, Anna finished her last job of the morning, her hands sore and her heart heavy. She glanced at the clock tower near the market's center. It was almost time to head to Harper Enterprises, though she had no idea what to expect. As she walked toward the bus stop, her small earnings jangling in her pocket, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, today would be the start of something new. The late afternoon sun cast a warm golden hue over Carson City, softening the sharp edges of the bustling streets as Anna Thompson stepped off the bus near Willow Street. Her heart raced, a mix of exhaustion and nervous anticipation swirling in her chest. The events of the past few days, saving Jane Harper, facing Sarah's cruelty, and learning of Jane's true identity as the CEO of Harper Enterprises, felt like a whirlwind she could barely comprehend. Her faded jeans and t-shirt were dusty from a day of hauling crates at the Central Market, and her sneakers were worn thin, but Anna carried herself with a quiet determination. The bruise on her cheek from Margaret's outburst had faded slightly, but the weight of her stepmother's anger still hung over her like a storm cloud. Jane had asked her to come to Harper Enterprises that afternoon, promising something important, and though Anna had no idea what to expect, a spark of hope flickered within her. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to break free from the suffocating life she'd endured under Margaret and Sarah. As Anna approached her home, the squat, peeling house on Willow Street loomed ahead its sagging porch, a stark reminder of the hostility waiting inside. She paused at the gate, her hand trembling on the latch. The memory of Margaret locking her out 2 nights ago, forcing her to sleep in the cold, stung sharply. She took a deep breath, steeling herself, and pushed the gate open. The yard was quiet, the usual sounds of Margaret's shouting or Sarah's smug laughter absent. Anna's stomach twisted. Silence in this house was rarely a good sign. She stepped toward the door, her sneakers crunching on the gravel when it flew open, and Margaret stood there, her wiry frame rigid with fury. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her eyes blazed with a rage that made Anna's heart skip. "You, Margaret," hissed her voice low and venomous. "Where have you been? And don't give me any nonsense about helping people." Anna opened her mouth to explain, but Margaret cut her off, stepping forward. "Because of you. My Sarah's in trouble. I heard what happened at the market. Your meddling got her arrested." Anna's knees weakened, but she stood her ground, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said. "Sarah attacked someone and stole from her. I just helped the woman who was hurt." Margaret's face twisted, her hand shooting out to grab Anna's arm, her nails digging into her skin. "Helped? You ruined everything," she screamed, her voice echoing through the yard. "Sarah was our ticket out of this dump, and you, daughter of a useless mistress, destroyed it." Before Anna could react, Margaret's other hand swung a sharp slap, landing across Anna's face. The pain stung, but Anna bit her lip, refusing to cry. She'd endured worse, and she wouldn't give Margaret the satisfaction of seeing her break. "You'll pay for this," Margaret spat, dragging Anna by the arm toward the house. "You'll stay here and work off every cent you cost me, until I say otherwise." The commotion drew neighbors to their windows, their faces peering out with a mix of curiosity and indifference. Anna struggled to pull free, her heart pounding, when a deep, commanding voice cut through the chaos. "Enough!" Margaret froze, her grip loosening, and Anna turned to see Jane Harper striding across the yard, flanked by 2 security guards in dark suits. Jane's charcoal suit was impeccable, her green eyes blazing with authority. Behind her, a sleek black SUV idled on the street, its presence a stark contrast to the rundown neighborhood. Margaret's jaw dropped, her anger faltering as she registered Jane's commanding presence. "Who are you?" she demanded, though her voice wavered. Jane's gaze was cold, unyielding. "I'm Jane Harper, CEO of Harper Enterprises," she said, "and this young woman you're attacking saved my life. You should be ashamed." Anna's breath caught her eyes wide as she looked at Jane. The neighbors' whispers grew louder, their curiosity piqued. Margaret released Anna's arm, stepping back, her face a mix of fear and defiance. "This is a family matter," she said, her voice shrill. "She's my stepdaughter, and she's caused nothing but trouble." Jane's lips pressed into a thin line, her gaze never leaving Margaret. "Trouble?" she said, her tone sharp. Anna risked everything to help a stranger, while your daughter Sarah attacked me and stole from my company. And this is how you treat someone with a heart like hers." Margaret opened her mouth to argue, but Jane raised a hand, silencing her. "I came here to thank Anna, not to watch her be abused. Step aside." Margaret hesitated, her eyes darting between Jane and Anna, but the presence of the security guards made her back down. She retreated to the porch, her arms crossed, her face twisted with resentment. Jane turned to Anna, her expression softening. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. Anna nodded, her throat tight with emotion. I didn't expect you to come here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jane smiled, a warmth in her eyes that made Anna's chest ache. "You deserve better than this," Jane said. "Come with me. I have something for you." Anna glanced at Margaret, whose glare could have burned holes through her, but she followed Jane, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. They drove to Harper Enterprises, the SUV gliding through Carson City's streets past the market and into the gleaming downtown district. Anna sat in the back, her hands clasped in her lap, stealing glances at Jane, who was reviewing documents on a tablet. The office tower loomed ahead, its glass facade reflecting the setting sun. Inside the lobby was all marble and steel, a world away from the dusty market, or Anna's crumbling home. Jane led her to a spacious office on the top floor, where a view of the city stretched out beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. Anna stood awkwardly, feeling out of place in her worn clothes, but Jane gestured to a chair. "Sit," she said, her tone kind but firm. "You've earned this." Anna obeyed, her mind racing. What could Jane possibly want with her? A thank you was one thing, but this felt bigger. Jane sat across from her, folding her hands on the desk. "Anna, when I went undercover in the market, I was looking for truth," she said. "I needed to know who in my company could be trusted. Sarah failed that test spectacularly. She stole from me, lied, and hurt me without a second thought. But you saw a stranger in pain and acted without hesitation. That's rare." Anna blushed, looking down at her hands. "I just did what felt right," she said softly. Jane leaned forward, her eyes intense. "And that's why I'm here. I want to give you a chance to build a life you deserve. I'm offering you a full scholarship to Carson City College, a job here at Harper Enterprises, and a place to live, a small apartment near campus paid for by me." Anna's jaw dropped, her breath catching. I don't know what to say," she stammered, tears prickling her eyes. Jane smiled, sliding a folder across the desk. "Say yes," she said. "The paperwork's ready. You can start classes next semester, and the job's entry level, but it's a foot in the door. You're smart, Anna. I saw it in the way you carried yourself, even under pressure." Anna opened the folder, her hands trembling, as she read the details: a scholarship for a business degree, a job in the company's outreach program, an apartment lease with her name on it. It was more than she'd ever dreamed of, a lifeline out of the darkness of Willow Street. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to repay you." Jane shook her head. "You already have," she said. "Your kindness saved me. Now let me help you." Back on Willow Street, word of Sarah's arrest had spread, and the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Margaret sat on the porch, her face pale as she listened to a neighbor recount the market incident. She'd always seen Sarah as her golden child, the one who'd lift them out of poverty with her charm and ambition. Now, with Sarah in custody and Anna suddenly under the protection of a powerful woman, Margaret's world was crumbling. She stormed into the house, slamming the door, and began packing a bag, muttering about leaving town. But before she could, Jane's security team arrived, delivering a message: the gifts Jane had planned to give the family, a donation of food and supplies, were being withdrawn. "You don't deserve them," The guard said, his voice cold. Margaret fell to her knees, pleading, but it was too late. Her cruelty had cost her everything. Anna, now standing outside Harper Enterprises, looked out at the city, the folder clutched to her chest. She thought of the market, of Jane's crumpled form, of the crowd that had turned away. She thought of Margaret's slaps, Sarah's sneers, and the years she'd spent feeling invisible. But she also thought of Mrs. Carter's kind words, of Jane's gratitude, of the small moments that had kept her going. She turned to Jane, who stood beside her, and found her voice. "I want to say something," she said, her tone firm. Jane nodded, gesturing for her to go on. Anna faced an imaginary crowd, her words clear and strong. "Kindness isn't weakness," she said. "It's the hardest thing to do when the world's against you. I helped someone because it was right, not because I expected anything back. And now I'm standing here with a future I never thought I'd have. If you see someone hurting, don't look away. Help them. Stand up, because you never know how much it might mean or what it might bring back to you." Jane clapped, her eyes shining with pride. "That's the spirit I saw in you," she said. "You're going to do great things, Anna." The city stretched out before them, alive with possibility. Anna thought of the lesson she'd learned, not just that kindness could change lives, but that it could reveal who you truly are. For those listening, she hoped they'd take it to heart. Empathy isn't just a gift to others. It's a strength that can transform your world. And as she stepped into her new life, Anna knew she'd never forget the day she chose to act, even when it cost her everything, because that choice had given her everything.